G'day Gear Junkies, Jason here. About 20 years ago in the mid-2000s, Digitech released a short series of 5 pedals that were basically just modified versions of some classic pedals. And this series had been pretty much forgotten until JHS did that infamous video 2 years ago about the Bad Monkey. I did a bit of reading about them and I got to wondering if the other pedals in the series were also hidden gems as well, and also wondering how they compared to the pedals that they were based on. But before I go too far, if you like this kind of content, please subscribe. And if you want to help this channel out, you can go to the Middle Age Gear Junkie store and purchase some merchandise, or you can also support me through Patreon, where I'm uploading additional content. Thank you for the support. Now, the 5 pedals in this series were the Screaming Blues, which was based on the Boss Blues Driver, the Bad Monkey, which was based on the Ibanez Tube Screamer, the Hothead, which was based on the Boss DS1, and then we had the Grunge, which was based on the DoD Grunge, and the Death Metal, which was also based on the DoD Death Metal. Here's my clean sound. I'm playing a Telecaster at the moment, but I will change guitars throughout this demo. And I'm going into a Marshall Plexi Studio, so it's only 20 watts, and that's going through a cabinet with 2 Celestion G12T speakers. I've got both the Screaming Blues and the Blues Driver in a channel each of the JHS switchback. The Digitech pedals are always going to be on the green side, and I'll put the other pedals on the red side during this demo. Now I've got all controls set to noon except for the level controls. I've just got them both set at unity gain. So this is without the pedal. Okay, so just on that setting, the Blues Driver just sounded like it's got a little bit more guts, so I'm just going to turn up the low frequencies a little bit there. Now I'm going to try a low gain setting, medium gain setting, and high gain setting for both these pedals. So I'm going to turn the gain down. It's just a bit of definition. Yeah, already sounds very similar. That sounded really similar. Now I'm going to try a medium gain setting. It's got a really sort of barky top end, so I'm going to have to wind that down. That's better. It's also a bit prickly. All right, let's give that a try. I'm really impressed with the Blues Screamer at this point. It really does sound like a Blues Driver style overdrive. So now I'm going to turn it all the way up and it gets into distortion, almost fuzz kind of territory. Now I have the Bad Monkey and the TS9 plugged in. I actually like that setting. I think I'll use that. Just like I did with the blues pedals, I'm going to try a low gain setting. Yeah, just like the blues screamer, when I turned down the gain, I lost a bit of top end bite. That's better. Sounds pretty good. One of the most popular ways to use a tube screamer pedal is in front of another overdrive or distortion pedal or going into your already driving amplifier. So I've turned up the gain on the Marshall Plexi here. We've got a bit of a crunchy tone happening, and I've already set these pedals up to go with that tone. Now I'm playing my Seymour Duncan loaded Court, and I'm still running through a clean sound on the Marshall. Now, I've got the hothead and the DS1 plugged in. With the DS1, it has a very infamous tone control. As you turn it up, you increase top end, but you also decrease bottom end at the same time. So it can be very tricky to dial it in just right. The hothead gives me separate low and high controls, so that should make things a little easier. So for this first example, I'm just going to leave the drive at noon, and I'm just going to try and set up the tone controls to get a good sound. So the hothead there, a little bit prickly in the top end, so I'm just going to wind that down a little bit. That's not bad. And the DS1. All right, we'll give that a go. So I'm not going to do a low gain example with these pedals because, let's face it, you don't use a DS1 style pedal at low gain. What I'm going to do is turn the gain up past halfway because one of the things that I've noticed with the DS1 is it doesn't actually add much extra drive, but it does become a lot squishier. So let's see if the hothead can replicate that. Just like the Tube Screamer, a popular way of using the DS1 style pedal is to put it in front of an already driving amplifier, especially if that amplifier is sagging and maybe sound a little bit muffled like this. So the DS1 tone control, while harsh going into a clean channel, this is where it's really going to come into its own. It's really going to add a lot of bite and a bit more clarity to my sound while also adding more saturation. Now tune the chord down to D standard. So here's the Digitech Grunge. Yeah, it's that sound. I've got the gain all the way down because these pedals infamously have a huge amount of gain, so I thought I'd start off on the lowest gain setting. So the butt on the Grunge pedal is low and the face is high, where it's marked low and high on this one here. So I'm going to go ahead and take out a lot of the highs. That sounds better. Okay, I'll give it a bit more grunge. That's pretty chunky. I really like the way the low control there, or the butt, is voiced. It's really thick and chunky in the bottom end. All right, full grunge. All right, so now it's time for the death metal. I've tuned down to drop C. Now, it's important to understand with this pedal that it doesn't have a drive or gain control. It's just, they've set it with the gain on full, and they've given you a 3-band EQ and a level. So on the original pedal, they were labeled RIP for output, guts, which is your lows, pain, which is your mid frequencies, and scream, which is your top end. Yeah, the top end on it's quite searing. I think it needs to be balanced out by turning up a lot of that bottom end. All right. I actually think the Digitech's a bit fatter. Let's try a scoop setting. Takes away a lot of the volume. I'd never played the Screaming Blues before, and I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it did a really good job of getting those blues driver style tones. Now, I like the fact that they've labeled it as an overdrive / distortion, because this pedal is a bit of both. In fact, the BD2 is one of the most versatile overdrives that I can think of. It can do anything from fairly light overdrive all the way up to nearly fuzz and everything in between. So it's an incredibly versatile pedal. I think that the Screaming Blues is every bit as versatile as the BD2, and it really is just a matter of taste whether you prefer one over the other. I've been a fan of the Bad Monkey now for years. I think that it is quite a good tube screamer style pedal. It's not quite the same, obviously, with the different EQ functions. It's going to be a little bit different. I think that the tube screamer's got a little bit more presence to it, somewhere between the low and the high control on the Digitech. So I don't know, it's kind of hard to put my finger on. Maybe it's because I'm used to playing tube screamers that I kind of lean towards the Ibanez, but this still is really good. I did resist the temptation to sell this pedal after the JHS video came out. I paid about 50 Aussie bucks for this pedal, and I saw them selling for somewhere between 400 and 600 Aussie dollars within weeks of that video coming out. They have come back down since then to about 100, 120 Aussie dollars. In as far as the controversy from that video, where he used a bunch of different styles of overdrive and supposedly got the Bad Monkey to replicate the tones of all of those overdrives, if you watch carefully, he doesn't really change the settings much on the Bad Monkey, and he's using the other pedals to try and imitate the Bad Monkey, not the other way around. And the other thing is that he always plays it in a band mix, and that sort of hides, I think, some of the detail in the pedal. I think if he A-B'd them like I did today, you would have heard a fair bit of difference between the Bad Monkey and, say, the Zen Drive or the Klon or the Blues Breaker. Now, the pedal that I thought was the most different from the original was the Hothead. I don't think it was hugely different from the DS1. I think it's in the ballpark, but there are a couple of minor differences. So you got to understand with the DS1 how the tone control works. It works a bit more like a big muff tone control. So as you turn it up, it gets brighter, but it also cuts bass content as well. So it becomes a lot thinner and bitier. So I found that hard to replicate on this. The high frequencies were voiced even higher than on this pedal, so it was really, really sort of fizzy. So I had to knock back the high frequencies a fair bit. The other thing that it didn't quite replicate was once you get the gain up past halfway on the DS1, it becomes really squishy and compressed. It doesn't add a huge amount of gain, it just becomes squishier. The Hothead didn't seem to have that same amount of squishiness. The DS1 has never been my favorite type of distortion. It has grown on me over the years because I've stopped expecting it to be something that it isn't. It's never going to be a super refined, precise, and smooth distortion. It's always going to be very raspy, very rough around the edges, and you need to play it as such. You don't approach it in the same way as you do other types of distortion. And since I've sort of accepted that, I've started to enjoy it a lot more. The hothead here, I think, does a good job of that kind of tone. If you don't like the amount of compression that you get from a DS1, you might actually prefer the hothead. So it's definitely worth a try, and they're still fairly cheap on the secondhand market. The pedal that I thought sounded most like the original was the Grunge. This should not come as a surprise because Digitech actually started as the digital division of DoD back in the 80s. The only real difference between these two pedals is the second output that all of these pedals have. It has a direct out so that you can go straight into a mixer or a computer interface, which I'll demo for you right now. I expected the death metal pedals to be pretty much exactly the same as well, but I was wrong. I found that the original sounded a bit fizzier in the top end, sounded a bit more like a metal zone, whereas I think they may have revisited this pedal and just changed the voicing of the EQ a little bit, and I actually preferred the newer version to the older one. But I kind of got the feeling with both this one and the Grunge pedal that this was kind of like a relaunch for these two pedals. An interesting note on the two DoD Jason Lamb pedals. There were two different versions of both the Grunge pedal and the death metal that came out during the 90s. So the original versions were like this. They had a metal footplate here, and they didn't have any traditional names for the controls. They all had weird names like Loud and Grunge and Butt. The second version that came out in the mid-90s, they expanded the range. They brought out other pedals as well, such as the Milk Box and so on, and they had a plastic foot switch. And on the death metal, for example, here, it also gives you proper names for the controls as well as the RIP and guts and all that sort of stuff. So there are two different versions. The original versions obviously are worth more on the secondhand market. So please comment below and let me know if you've owned or own any of these pedals, if you still use them, how you like to have them set, what sort of amps or guitars you like to use with them. I'd be really interested to know. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. You can support this channel by going to the Middle Age Gear Junkie store and purchasing some merchandise, or you can also support me through Patreon, where I'm uploading additional content, including previews of my upcoming videos. Other than that, my name is Jason. Have a great day. See you later.